Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Transforming EdTech to Connect Talent and Work. My name is Farouk Day, and I come to you from Stanford University as the Dean of Career and Experiential Education and Associate Vice Provost there. And with me is a panel of esteemed friends and colleagues. Andy Chan from Wake Forest, all the way in the back. Ashley Bittner from Owl Ventures. John Mitchell from Stanford University. Anthony, forgive me, how do you say your last name?
Salcito.
Salcito, thank you. I don't want, people butcher my name all the time, so I don't want to do that to you. From Microsoft, and Garrett from Handshake. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening in the world of work and how we prepare talent for the future of work, considering all of the changes that are happening. I want to start our conversation with some opening remarks, and then we're going into a conversation with our panelists and share some of our thoughts and experiences and what we're seeing in the world of work today. Let me first say that what we're noticing today is that the world of work is changing, higher education is changing, industry is changing, and there's a new generation that's coming into the workforce today that works differently and expects different things from work. There are 92 million millennials already in the workforce, more than previous generations, and Gen Z is coming behind them. These generations communicate differently, use text messages, social media, blogging for their information.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
The slides aren't changing, so I thought I might let them know because you got some slides here.
Yes, that's okay.
It's okay.
Yes, thank you.
No problem.
These are slides just from my own notes.
Oh,
but
sorry about
I
that.
appreciate
I was trying.
he's looking for me. He's looking out for me.
Yeah.
That's good.
You just went behind the curtain.
Sorry. Bad freak.
That's good. So the world of work is being run today by digital natives, but what we also know about these new generations of talent that are coming into the workforce is that they are experiencing lots of other challenges. This is a generation that's in debt, $20,000 in debt for the average college graduates. Hopefully it's not 20 million. 30% are back in the nest for at least the first year after college. For those of you who are parents of college graduates or recent graduates or going to college, students who are going to college, you're probably thinking or feeling this pain. 19% are underemployed in what they would consider low skills jobs. 25% are in admin support jobs, and 14% are still seeking opportunities within the first 6 months after they graduate. So this gap between college and career, college and the workforce is widening as the world of work changes ever more rapidly. And this is creating a new push for both higher education and for industry to change and to look for new paradigms and new ways of doing what we do. What we know is that higher education and industry follow economic cycles. For the last 100 years, when we look at what has happened on college campuses, every 20 or 30 years, we shift and change into new models, from vocational models to placement models to counseling and advising models to now we're talking about developing networks and connections and communities. And all of this is following some very key trends that I want to mention before we go into our panel conversation. First is that parents today and families are more involved in their college students' decisions about what to study, where to work, what type of work to do than ever before. Many of us refer to them as helicopter parents. In a recent conversation I had with a college student, she was describing to me her parents as no longer being helicopter parents, but they're hovering from far, far away, but they're still very involved in watching. So maybe the new term that we should coin is drone parents, who are hovering from afar, but they are absolutely zooming in and and they'll come down at any moment. These families are absolutely concerned about the cost of education, and that is a trend that is definitely present and has an impact on what's happening in today's environment. Is college worth it, is the question that lots of students are thinking about, that their families are thinking about, and is college the only way to accomplish the goals that they're trying to accomplish? What we have learned is also that students care much more, care more about meaningful work than necessarily about just jobs. They are not just looking to get a job and stay in one set of career path for their entire life until they retire. They want to have an impact on society, on communities, on other people. They want their work to be meaningful. And what we know is that our work together as industry and higher education is to help them gain the experiences, the knowledge about themselves, about the world of work, to build the connections in order to be on the path of meaningful work. All of this is now being challenged by what's happening in the workforce today. Job displacement by automation is very much a real thing that all of us are concerned about. 57% of jobs worldwide are threatened by real job displacement and due to automation. And that percentage is much higher in other countries like Thailand and China. What we're also seeing is that artificial intelligence is coming in and changing the nature of work. And for example, the number of AI patent applications in the US and China alone have increased dramatically or exponentially in the last 10 years. And all of this is pushing the skills that are necessary in today's workforce and in the future, from physical abilities to more cognitive skills, to more systematic skills that humans can do really well. So the top skills of the future are about critical thinking, are about complex problem solving, creativity, people management, and cognitive skills rather than physical abilities. So all of this takes us to the role of higher education in general. There are three cornerstones of the university of today and of the future. Universities have been about the creation and expansion and dissemination of knowledge and of practice through research, through teaching. But also increasingly especially in the last couple of decades, universities have been engaged in the mission of personal and professional development of their students. Teaching students about themselves and about the world that's around them and how to engage with it. Helping students learn skills and abilities and learn and understand the values that they should care about. But I believe that the universities of the future will have to be more than just these two cornerstones that I mentioned. I think the universities are having to shift into ecosystems of connections and communities that connect students with employers, with companies, with alumni, with faculty, and with communities outside of those universities in order to allow the students to engage with opportunities much more than they have in the past. So all of this is forcing these following changes, these changes. First is that we need to approach college students as life designers rather than career explorers. What if they take their life as the project that they have to work with and design their purpose and design their life using design thinking methodologies? We in universities have to teach students not only how to think and how to do, but also how to work and how to connect. So we are in the age of new ways of thinking, of doing, of working, and of connecting. And as a result, because of this last point of connections, we are in the business now of developing talent communities that industry can come and recruit from and connect where industry can connect with students. These talent communities can be based on discipline, on academic discipline, on skills, on geography, on affiliations, and therefore we have to be much more than just infrastructure, which is the traditional model of universities. We have to become ecosystems for communities and for connections. We have to reframe our entire education system from being about scale rather than only depth, for being about advocacy rather than guidance, for being about industry connections, for being about mentoring, and for offering a transformational experience rather than transactional experience. This calls for a new culture of happenstance rather than planning for the future, and it calls for building community rather than infrastructure, and it calls for an engaging technology rather than a transactional technology. An engaging technology that is intuitive for the users, that is social, and that is fun, that is engaging. And it calls for a new set of outcomes for education that is about increasing awareness, increasing knowledge, increasing confidence, all around this premise of engagement in order to ensure stronger destination outcomes. So all of this has helped us at Stanford to create really a new pathway towards meaningful work rather than to get students on the pathways to jobs. And we have created this meaningful work model that's around the elements of design, of venturing, of pursuing opportunities, and where we're helping students not only learn, but also connect with meaning, with community, and with opportunities, and with the entire ecosystem in order to advance their careers. With that, I want to transition to our panel today and really just have a conversation about what is happening today as we try to transform technology in order to help with these connections. And I want to start the first question with Anthony from Microsoft. What are the big problems of the moment relative to talent and work today, and how do we try to solve them? And I would invite our panelists to chime in and engage in this conversation as well.
Yes, I think first off, we have to recognize that the critical things that we're trying to transform, I often hear about conversations around the transformation in process, but the biggest things have already transformed. If you talked about the workplace, certainly the way in which all of us learn, certainly students learn, has fundamentally changed. The way in which we collect, create, share ideas has changed. Student mindsets in terms of the way in which they see the world has changed. But I actually look at the opportunity for shift and this disruption that's happening in economies as even bigger. We have evolved really quickly from a world of work where people went to find jobs. They went to cities, they went to countries where natural resources or factories existed. We've transitioned and are transitioning to a world where jobs or work finds people. So the value of education or learning and alignment to things that you can create and do in society and country will have an opportunity to not only create a new opportunity for students, but fundamental disruption of economic GDP realities that exist around the world. And that's creating tremendous optimism for many parts of the world that were on the wrong side of this economic dynamic that has existed for centuries. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to be a fairly big change and challenge for institutions. One of the things that I come across relatively frequently is the tension that exists with traditional and maybe elite institutions in the United States and the purposeful nature of what they're trying to do for students. I was actually just with a top 10 ranked institution in the US a couple of weeks ago, having a roundtable discussion with various departments in the institution. And I was talking to a professor from the computer science school, and he said, I am getting flack from my colleagues because I had to invoke the E word in a course description. And I said, well, what's the E word? I said, what can it be? I said, employability, employment as the E word. And he said, I can't even consider that word. But I actually had to use engineering in a course description. And they're taught, essentially, their philosophy is to be much more theoretical about the core foundations and actually align it to the workplace specifically. And the irony is that that course has the largest wait list huge demand for new opportunities in the course. But as we had the conversation, one of the comments in the room was, why do we need to change? We attract the best students. The students come here. They'll be successful whether or not we evolve both the technology role that we play, the way in which we teach and learn, the course map, et cetera. Students are resilient and they'll find a way. And I think fundamentally we still have tension where people are losing the reality of why students go to school. What's the impact that they want with regards to the talent, and how do we tune the education system to drive that purpose? And if we don't do it, I think the other alternatives and the disruption that will happen to education will continue to grow. And we see it across the landscape in the United States and certainly beyond from the travels that I see.
Ashley, you're nodding your head, so you must agree with a lot of that. So is there room for change? Do we need to change? What are you thinking?
Well, absolutely, and I was going to actually build on some of the stats that you had mentioned in the beginning. We think about this from an investor perspective as big problems equal big markets, big opportunities, although it is scary for learners out there today. Another survey that we looked at recently shows that McKinsey study, 375 million folks are going to have to upskill or retrain by 2030, 14% of the global workforce, which is a big challenge, right? But we see that as a place where entrepreneurs can really focus on both the consumer and the enterprise side. You can build companies that are focused, like Thinkful in our portfolio, that help folks transition into computer science roles and data science. We have companies that are more content agnostic, to your point as well, Anthony, around helping people learn in these micro experiences, blogs, podcasts, all the ways that we learn today, and really get credit for that and show their skills. So it's a company like Degreed, right? And so we see lots of opportunity for this kind of innovation. And what we look for, at least on the investor side, is that outcome for learners, and how do you really measure that and communicate that to the market. So we think a lot about what's common across our portfolio is that effectiveness and outcomes for learners, regardless of the consumer or enterprise side.
What are the challenges from the investor perspective as you approach these opportunities or these ideas from entrepreneurs who are trying to change the system?
Well, absolutely. I think that is a challenge, right? Trying to figure out how you measure effectiveness and communicate that, and depending on the stage of your company, what's the best way of doing that. The other piece, so it also probably makes sense for me to ground it in where we invest. So we're investing post-product market fit when companies are scaling. So some of the challenges there are around really getting that product market fit, solving a real pain point for the customer, and then building the business model around that. The other piece in education that can be tough is thinking about the buyer and the user might be different, so making sure you have alignment there and really are able to communicate that value to your customer.
Very good. Andy, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, one thing that, even my background, so I've had like half my career on the running educational technology companies and hiring talent, and I have the other half of my background, which is on the inside the institution and sort of thinking about what leaders are trying to think about, running a career office, things like that. The way I think about problem, which I think is a good thing, I think the first big problem is that if you ask that of any person who's like running a higher educational institution, I don't think they fundamentally can clarify clearly what that problem might be, right? So they all think about it differently, which makes it very difficult to figure out, like, what are we solving for? The things that I see in this particular space, so first I would say at the student level, there's a motivation problem, and then there is an ability to sort of have opportunity and access and education in the right kind of way, right? What we all say, and you've heard us talk about this, get them as early as you possibly can, but the reality is that not everyone wants to engage in it as early as they possibly can, and different schools have different philosophies around that, so there's some fundamental tensions in that. Also, it's arguably, maybe it's not actually to get them early if they're not ready at that moment. So personalized is a really good idea. So that's one example. Another example would be, you have a whole set of students who they'll come in and they'll say they know what they want, what Jeff Slingo would call a sprinter. You actually spend all the time with them, they actually don't know what they want. They actually figured out that they don't really want to be a doctor, but they said they were a doctor because they were good at science and math when they were in high school. So what do you do to help them? And it's one of those things where we could all say, well, you should go tap into the network. They're like, I'm too busy having fun at school and doing my homework and who knows whatever else, that trying to figure out the career stuff at the same time as going to school is very difficult. So that's just the student. If you then think about the majority of the people who influence people inside a school, it's the faculty. And the faculty and their incentives and their goals and their careers are built on something very different than what we're talking about here. So I know as we might think, well, then it's the administrators. But again, if you've talked about the administrators, many of them would say, our problem is that we're just trying to keep our universities afloat. We actually don't really care about this because we're worried about enrollment and managing our yield and managing our retention because we have to pay the bills. So what's tricky about all this is that when we get to the problem, we have to clarify who are we talking about. Is the problem actually at the student level? Are we trying to actually get the faculty players in this? Or are we trying to get the administration to do something? And then underlying all this, where does technology play a role in actually helping make this work? And again, why I particularly like what Garrett's done at Handshake is that actually it's found a way to be in the middle of all this to help address the student issues, but also play with all the different people in the institution, at least as one piece of the puzzle.
You mentioned Handshake. College students don't have equitable access to opportunity. And I know that that's what you're trying to do at Handshake is to make that better. How can technology solve that issue? Tell us a little bit about that.
Great question. So I think I like to break the problem down into kind of three main parts. One of which is that there's unfair access to opportunities across the country. So as Jeff Slingo's book, fantastic, great thought leaders, talks about the idea that the main drivers for post-secondary outcomes beyond college are the socioeconomic status of your family and the regional proximity of your university. It's like a major metropolitan or economic hub. And so those are the two main drivers that drive access to opportunities. So at Handshake, we partner with leading career service centers all across the country to try to build a network that makes it easier for employers to connect with more schools and see more students. So I think access is one big problem, but even beyond access, you talked about, Andy, is information. So many career service centers and universities struggle with resource constraints. They struggle with being able to touch in a personalized way every single student along this very unique journey in college and provide them the right information to really reach their full potential and make the right career decisions. You think about a first-generation college student at a small university with 2 or 3 staff members, that student might not know what banking is or finance is or technology is. Do I work at a big company or a small company? Can I study a liberal arts field like psychology or like philosophy and end up being successful? So information, I think, is a huge problem that many universities struggle to scale up and teach their students. And then thirdly, I think one other big important component of this is helping employers look beyond just major and school and GPA as the way they find talent. So I think one of the things we're really trying to do at Handshake is leverage a lot of the data that we have around what employers are doing and how they're connecting with students to help inform, and help career service centers engage their students in this kind of personalized journey that they can't do as 15 staff members with 40,000 students.
That's good. John, I love that you laughed at the E word.
I didn't know which E word it was, but any of them could have been funny, right?
Why is employability such a? Because you come from the academic side at Stanford,
Right.
and I know you get it. And that's what makes working with you so fun and easy. Why? So tell us a little bit about the mystery in higher education of why employability is. Or feels so controversial and feels like it's a sticking point and challenges.
Yeah, so let me give you
the growth.
two points on that. One is, very pragmatically. So just for background, I'm a professor of computer science, so that's relevant, I suppose. One reaction across other parts of the university is everyone's angry at the computer science department for stealing all their students. And in the academic environment, enrollment is really the currency. If you want to hire more people, if you want budget for courses, all of the kind of internal economic structure is around number of majors, number of students, demand. And so when you're in the history department and you see demand, drop through the floor, that's problematic for the management of the field and the pragmatics of that. So that's one issue. Another angle on this is somewhat more personal. I think most people go into an academic career because they have a deep conviction about the importance of the topic that they devote their life to. And so take any field in the humanities, if that was you felt that was your calling in life, and suddenly you don't feel that people value that, you feel kind of offended and would like some kind of clarity around that. And I think what many people putting those two factors together think is students now are driven by vocational interest in a way that does not value and appreciate long historic cultural and academic traditions on a wide range of fields. I think there's also a rhetoric in many fields around learning for learning's sake, and don't dilute what our true purpose, which is to find the truth, with some horrible pragmatic thing about money. I mean, all these things kind of get thrown together. So maybe that's a little longer than you we're up for. But I think there's a culture war in a sense in many academic campuses around the things that Anthony started with, and their resolution will be long and complex, really.
Data is really important in helping us connect these stories and in helping us maybe even reframe the work that we do to help students. And each of you interact with data to help you make decisions and to help you move this process forward and this moving forward. I'm wondering how data can help and is helping transform this world of connecting students with opportunity, with work, whether it's through technology or through programs or through education and what we're doing. Ashley, I'm wondering how you're interacting with data and how that's making a difference.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we see it play out in the various investments that we've made. We see companies like Degreed, which we talked a little bit about before, that are helping people create skill transcripts. And we're leveraging data from folks using that platform to make recommendations on things they might want to learn, help them create pathways to other careers is one way that we're certainly seeing it play out. But there's a lot of different ways that folks are using this to help folks identify what skills they might be naturally inclined towards, what jobs they might like, what types of different resources they might want to use to upskill. So we see it really being the crux of how folks are making some of these transitions.
Mm-hmm. Anthony, I'm wondering if data can be used to help bring technology into this world more and help push both universities and industry towards a new paradigm.
I think so. I think one of the things that happens, and we've looked at a lot of this shift, and it often starts with algebra, where students start to question why they're learning what they're learning, and what does it have to do with the real world. And this is a context that happens in every algebra class in the first week. And that progression is challenged by education, and certainly a lot of what John shared, where we still struggle with aligning education to workplace opportunities. We've been looking at, both with work from the economic graph at LinkedIn, with the Microsoft graph, to actually provide more thoughtful connection between skills, learning outcomes, content, as well as workplace need. There's a project that we've started in Andhra Pradesh in India called Sangam, which actually uses data from the economic graph from LinkedIn to actually support the learner progression as students are learning, in terms of what courses that they should be taking, what skills that they have, where their interest lies, and how do we chart a learning path both within and outside of the institution. We're also looking at it inside Microsoft, and I think companies increasingly are going to get smart about this. We have, like every other technology company, significant job gap. There's thousands of jobs open perpetually at Microsoft because it's hard for us to find the students with the talent to fuel the economy. It's hard enough to find programmers, but even harder to find data scientists, even harder to find folks who can understand mixed reality, robotics, quantum. These are areas that are a challenge for companies like Microsoft, which have deep pockets and attract students from the best institutions around the world. We've been actually looking internally to see what it takes to be successful inside Microsoft. And what we found is actually, it's different. It's not often where students come from that determines their success inside the company. We look at, we hire from the best institutions, but we also look at which students, which employees are actually thriving in our workplace? And how do we get smarter about where we open up our recruitment lens? How do we think differently about the talents that we're looking for to succeed in our environment? I think companies are going to get smarter about sort of opening up their window in terms of how they recruit and attract talent using data. And I think that's going to be critical for employers, but certainly the pathway to get students a purposeful connection to what they're learning now and where they go with it is going to be critical.
Right. I'm going to just jump on that just a little bit. And the same type of points you're mentioning at Microsoft, we're actually seeing at Handshake unfold across this network. Of this fall, Handshake will be at 750 universities across the country, and students build these really rich profiles with work experiences, projects, interests, skills they're learning in the classroom. And we're seeing employers actually really look and try to proactively build brand with students across the country, kind of no matter what school they go to. This idea that many employers, and even Microsoft talks about that the talent is evenly distributed and opportunity really isn't. This idea that the top students is relatively uniform across all schools. We're seeing employers go in and search for actual competencies and skills in the classroom. And you see higher education really trying to focus on how can they more effectively articulate the competencies and skills that are being developed in the classroom? How can they help map the coursework and curriculum development to vocational skills that employers are demanding that graduates have? And so I think there's a lot of great work being done by an organization called the National Association for College and Employers, NACE, where they're actually trying to standardize competencies that employers can then proactively engage with talent and find. And I think especially where it seems like where there's a near-term impact that's going to be massively change a lot is in these very concrete, discretely measurable skills, the pre-professional degrees. Where it gets much harder for a lot of employers to figure out is on the psychometric front or on the personality assessment front, where how do you help evaluate, kind of quantitatively the skills that a psychology major has, right? And so I think that's an area where a lot of employers are spending a lot of money trying to figure out how they can open up their criteria to find students that are skilled.
How do we do that?
On the university side, so I think about it almost like the same thing what Anthony's trying to do. So I think about it again, at the student level, I'd love to figure out how, and I feel like what's exciting right now is we're at this place where it's just starting to be possible. So we have all this data that they come in when they're admitted in the registrar's office that is all related to their academics. Then we actually have then the Handshake graph, what they're doing within Handshake, and how can we actually see the activity level of every student. And also, we're trying to pen that with career readiness. Like, how can we rate the career readiness of every student so that we know, are they ready to go to market, essentially? And we can actually measure their outcomes through Handshake, too. We can actually connect that then to the LinkedIn graphs. When they become alumni, we can see over time, we have a full portfolio of when they came in as a student, all the way through when they became an alum, what does our whole population look like? Where are we seeing there are issues, which is actually the number one thing I think all of us worry about is the tail. Right? It's the students who aren't engaging. The students, for whatever reason, they don't think that we're serving them, but we actually have tons of programs and resources, but they're not working. What's that all about? We have to find that out. So we talk about our mission being empowering every Wake Forest student to successfully navigate from college to career, of which that's actually even beyond. It's every student is actually the big phrase. There are very few schools who actually are thinking about every single student. They're actually just trying to move everyone through the system. So we have to get to a place where we ultimately say we are tracking every student. That in higher ed is a bit different when I actually use that word, even tracking and reporting on every student. People are like, you don't do that. So this is a new day. The other side of it then is we have to also then think about program development. So Burning Glass and what they have allows you to see where are the needs in the marketplace given your local sector compared to what your programs you have, and what new programs could you offer that either help students who are in your program or develop new ones to have new lines of business. So that's a whole other area that, again, data is really helpful. And so I'm just super excited that we're on the brink of getting there. I think you could talk about that one tool. We're actually looking at Workday because of the kind of school we are, but there are other tools that schools are having where they have basically dashboards where every student's on a dashboard now. And that's super cool that we're actually thinking about that because we've never done that before. But what that does too is it forces us in our own institutions to think about what our jobs are that we do. Because we've never really had people inside the schools who are dashboard operators, who are actually career coaches who actually have to have 800 students who are theirs, where they actually have a dashboard they're managing. I'm going to hold our coaches to, so we're 800 students, How many do you know? How many don't you know? If you don't know, what are you going to do to actually get to those that you need to know? That's never been done before. And so it's exciting, but it's huge change management.
So I hope as you're talking about getting better at all the things you do on a day-to-day basis, an ongoing basis, you think a little bit out, and so I'll make a few comments on that. I've been on many occasions where people talk about technological disruption, and they say, okay, now everybody should learn to code. And as a computer scientist, that seems like just the wrong conclusion. If we're going to be able to automate anything, it's going to be computer scientists figuring out how to automate the most boring thing we do. So that can't be like the future, of work. So how would you begin to get your hands on, where are we headed in a 5, 10, 20-year, time frame? One scenario that's really pretty simple to think about is, contrast what we do now, which is about projects. We teach students or help them learn how to work together in groups. 5 years, 10 years, actually, now in many organizations, you might be a member of a team of 10. 6 of those 10 may be people, and the other 4 may be algorithms or automated processes or robots or something like that. So people need to learn how to operate in that kind of future environment that's technologically rich. And another just very simple thing quickly is, think about, because it's an easy example, what's happened in the home over a century. At some point you might have had people, if you were lucky, to help with cooking and washing and cleaning and so on. And now you have, a dishwasher and a microwave and a vacuum cleaner or maybe a little robot or something. So if you, kind of extrapolate or compare that by analogy to a work environment, we have an org chart. And what's going to happen through automation is some things at the bottom of that org chart are going to become automated. So that means the people who are left are going to have to be proportionally much better at managing these groups that are some people and some automated processes. So I think we ought to think a little bit that as we plan ahead. And then how can digital environments help with that? Well, try to support the kind of work that we'll have in the future, which will be technologically facilitated.
Ashley, you seemed like you wanted to chime in there.
Oh, I was going to chime in over to one point that he was making, which was, it's great to hear you're thinking about all students at Wake Forest. The other thing I was just going to mention is that, today's college students just different in terms of demographics and in terms of how they spend their time. You see a lot of students who are going to school when they're a little bit older, working, first generation, all these other things, and finding solutions for university experiences that meet those needs as well. So that's online programs, those are career-oriented programs, things like that are also an important part of this equation to make sure that we're serving the reality of today's higher education student is not just your 18-year-old who's going straight in for that traditional four-year experience. So I think it's just an important part of the conversation as well.
Maybe an underlying theme in everything that you're talking about is this concept of online education and even online connections between talent and work. I feel like it's been at least a decade where I hear in circles that online education is coming to disrupt education and it's the new thing, but I'm not sure if it's happening or if it'll ever happen. Where are we on that path, and will college be disrupted? Will the way we approach the workforce be disrupted? What is technology's role in that, and even preparing talent for the future? And we're seeing some examples here and there, but I'm not sure if we're really we have reached critical mass or if we're reaching the tipping point that forces universities to transform. Any of you have thoughts about this?
John, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that certainly the role of online learning is not for debate any longer. I think just a couple of years ago we were still discussing the effectiveness of MOOCs and whether online learning would have a role or a future, and that's clear. The one point I want to add that it's maybe not what we would, maybe other colleagues will share. The online learning role, I think the immediate and real shift is actually happening on the work side, on the corporate side. As we start to see about the workplace shift and skills shift, the need for online learning to scale and train and retrain the workplace is actually real. We're starting to see dynamics where I think just recently Microsoft became the largest contributor to edX courses, passing any institution, providing courses on edX. And we do that not only to train our employees, but to train companies that use our technology and support. And the role that corporate learning is going to have in shifting, how do we prepare and reskill our existing workplace, is going to be huge. So the role of online learning will become pervasive with regards to employees inside of the jobs. And certainly, of course, it will be part of the education landscape, both as we expand the need for higher education and advanced degrees inside the workplace, but also the options that students have, especially students who don't have the luxury of affording a traditional education.
And we definitely agree with that. And you also see from that same study that McKinsey did recently that employers, though, don't feel prepared, most don't feel prepared to take on this task, that their corporate learning and development offices really need to find new ways of helping their employees upskill, and that's through a lot of micro-learning experiences, courses like edX, et cetera, but a lot of those companies recognize, one, that it's one of the top challenges they face in the next decade, but also do not feel that they're prepared to do that. So I do think this is an area where you're going to see a lot more activity and a lot of innovation in the next couple of years.
So I think one simple thing about online learning is that there are that means many different things. There are widespread across the US, many community colleges offer online courses. That's nothing new. Extension programs, there have been many things in place for a long time. What does vary quite a bit is the pedagogy and the style and approach of that course. Some are simply, a seminar course done over Skype or something like that. Others are very different models. So there are many studies saying online learning is effective, it's not as effective, it's great, it's terrible. They're all kind of true in their own scope. And so imagine somebody saying, oh, I went to college, I went to a class, it was in a room. Man, that was terrible, I'm not going to go take another class in a room again. So it's the same kind of phenomenon. So don't kind of judge long-term based on the few examples that I think are primitive in many cases. Some things that are evident are, printing books on paper is not a growth industry. We are digital, we're going to be digital, we're going to be more digital. So that argument is not really kind of helpful or interesting in a way. How we use digital technology in education, there are a tremendous number of opportunities. What we do have the potential to do, and what we are doing, in many different ways, is collect data and evaluate. So the rate of improvement and quality will go up because we can measure things that we weren't able to measure before. So there will be changes, there will be interesting things, and hopefully we'll be able to reach greater scale at lower cost through digital technology, which is a realistic expectation, but it will take work, and it's a pedagogy and business model and educational program structure more than a technology problem. Really.
I'll say one provocative thing that I think we could see is that just as Amazon is getting into the healthcare business, Microsoft or Amazon or Google could get into the education business. They're learning ways to teach their employees in more aggressive, interesting ways than probably we can do in any university. And if anyone gets the desire to want to actually go after that market, they could come up with something that could totally change things dramatically. And so I do think that we haven't seen it or heard it, but I wouldn't be surprised in their back rooms they're all talking about it, and then it'll be a different game. So I do think that there is something about to happen that today we might just say, that's not going to happen, name the elite school, Wake Forest, we have this certain kind of model, but once Amazon comes out with it, all of a sudden, then we're pressured to do something different. And I think it'll be interesting when that happens.
I'm hoping that'll be something we didn't really want to teach anyway.
Yeah.
Back to the first E question, right? That would settle it, right? That'd do it.
Let me wrap it up with a really important question as we consider how the world of work is changing and how we need to prepare talent for the future of work. How do we ensure that the world of work of the future is more inclusive, is more equitable, and more diverse? when we consider minorities, women, all of our underrepresented communities. I know Handshake has been really looking into this issue of not only just democratizing opportunity, but also making sure that the world of work is inclusive for all of this new college graduate classes that are coming out. So what are you learning from the data that you're collecting, and also what are you learning from your interaction with industry and with colleges, and how are you trying to make a difference there?
Totally. So it's such an important trend with employers today. I mean, they are so focused, they're so focused on building cognitive diversity, racial diversity, gender diversity. They're so focused on finding students, first-generation college students, military veterans, the diversity of thought in the workplace, and the position that higher education, the volume of students that are graduating per year, many talent acquisition leaders view that as one of the most strategic ways to improve the diversity of their up-and-coming workforce. They're seeding their companies with innovative, young, diverse talent, and the competitive climate for the underrepresented minorities across the country is continuing to grow as access improves. So that's from a talent acquisition employer lens, where we're working with many employers to help them think through the strategies and help them more effectively connect with that audience. And then as it relates to the work that a platform like Handshake can help provide, I think there's a lot of education. There's a lot of position that we have in terms of helping all students understand how to meet their full potential. And a lot of that comes down to these structural socioeconomic issues around limited access to higher education, and then how do you help these students make the right decisions along the path that fits for them in a personalized way through their 4 years of college, to help them be career ready, to have the skills that are valued by employers, to help them be seen and run effective processes such that they can find to find internships and to find full-time jobs. And the last point I'll mention there is that I think that there's a ton today being done around helping students really desire to kind of peel back the curtain, to understand. Then they want more meaning in the work that they're doing. They want to understand what it means to work in a company, how they're going to grow, what skills they're going to learn, what the company culture is like, what leadership values. They want to make an impact in the world. And so the candidate experience and what students kind of expect from these companies and their outward kind of explanation of how they value diversity and inclusion in the workforce is a very important factor for students making career decisions. So I think helping companies tell their story and peel back the curtain as to what it's like to work for that company, helping students share anecdotes and learn from one another, learn from the universities, and also see inside the companies, I think is ultimately going to create a more effective matchmaking process. And a very important topic in today's society.
Mm-hmm. Ashley, what do companies have to do to receive this talent and to grow diversity as they receive this talent?
Well, we think it starts at the beginning, so companies prioritizing it. We have founders in our portfolio who very much prioritize it from the beginning. They're reporting on diversity metrics from day one. I also think that's more women and people of color investors on boards, on executive teams. And trying to starting that culture in the early days, because it's hard to retroactively build a diverse team. But I think it's across those leadership boards as well as this bottom-up trend that Garrett's talking about.
Anthony, any examples from Microsoft or some of the companies you're interacting with?
Well, I think it's probably the most important focus. It's a huge focus for companies like Microsoft. And certainly, when I think about this issue, though, I actually think about it at a global level. And I think it is dramatic what's going to happen with the education the employment landscape, the economic landscape over the next couple of decades. By 2050, 40% of the world's workplace will be in Africa. And we think of this problem as a small set. I'll give you just a quick example. I was meeting with the Minister of Education from Kenya, and she had a picture of Seoul, Korea, downtown Seoul, Korea, modern on her bulletin board. And I asked her about that picture because I had just recently been in Korea, and she said, she went to the picture and lifted it up, and she had the same exact street from Seoul, Korea in 1975. And she said, this is the country that I have now, and this is the country, and as she lowered the picture, this is the country I'm building. We often think about this as a US, how do we continue to move? The landscape for economic power has been distributed with a handful of companies for centuries. That's going to shift with technology. And we need education to be on point for that. And if we don't, the reality of diversity will happen globally, not just in the races and colors and genders in employers in the United States, but a landscape of people who are not part of the economic dynamics that exist globally. And I think that's the biggest shift that's going to happen. Companies that certainly operate globally need to be mindful of that, but the broader diversity around how we think about work that's created, innovations that's happening, et cetera, I think will be the most exciting thing that will happen in the next 30, 40 years.
Okay. John and Andy, I want the last words from you to be about what we do at Ground Zero on college campuses, where the three of us work to prepare for a diverse workforce in the future. What are we doing, or what do we do on our college campuses to create inclusive communities?
I'll be really brief because I thought the world view was a nice place to attend to. Very simply, students from less advantaged economic backgrounds are less tolerant about being told to go teach this because it's interesting, and much more attuned to employability. And that's kind of the simplest argument on campus for really being attentive to this issue, and I think that's should be part of everyone's discussion.
This is a complex issue on college campuses right now, diversity and the way students feel and the way that they feel in their institutions, and also their desire as young people to voice out things that they think aren't right, that's the time to do it. So I do think that we all who work in universities, faculty and staff, administrators, just need to be both incredibly sensitive, but also really well educated on what are these triggers, what are the things that we've done in these institutions that we can actually make better. I think that's one side. The other side is that in general, the more that we can do, and we've done this a lot at Wake in terms of specific programs that bring employers looking for diversity candidates with those students, that goes a long way to helping those students realize that we care about them, but that employers really want them, because the world's telling them something different than that, and they don't believe it, and so you actually have to work a little extra hard to show that it's really authentic.
Right.
So you're a leader. Any last words from you?
Well, my last words is for all of us and for all of you in the room to keep doing the important work to transform, to challenge the status quo, and to make the workplace more meaningful for all. Thank you all so much for spending this last hour with us, and thank you all so much for your insights. They've been very helpful. Much appreciated.